If you're taking notes, the title of our message for week 3 is Jesus said, "What about your mom?" Jesus said, "What about your mom?" The first thing people always say when they see your kids is, "She looks just like you," or "He has his dad's eyes." And you're thinking, well, I sure hope so, or there's a whole different conversation that we're gonna have, right? And here's the thing, our kids reflect us, and that's kind of fun. I think it's one of the fun parts of having kids. Maybe they look like you. Maybe you love wearing matching outfits with your kids. Maybe they start to mimic your facial expressions. We kind of had this situation happen with our son. I think he was a little over 1 year old, and we were eating dinner, and he just kept like rolling his eyes. And it wasn't like this like subtle, I don't really know what I'm doing eye roll. It was a very intentional eye roll. It was full on. He was using his whole body to roll his eyes. And I looked at Tess and I was like, he definitely doesn't get that from me. So I don't know where he gets that from. And she's looking at me like, he doesn't get that from me. And I'm like, Tess, I think he gets that from you, because I know he doesn't get it from me. And as she comes back at me, she rolls her eyes. And I said, look, see, that's what it is. That's where he gets it from. Or maybe they start to use your lingo, and it's dangerously funny when they use it out of context or in a place where you probably don't want them yelling, right? Because kids don't have volume control. They talk at one level usually, and it's screaming. And so we watch a lot of sports in our house, and basketball is kind of in the playoffs, so we're watching a lot of basketball in our house. And so sometimes when Tess is watching, she doesn't watch a whole lot of basketball. She knows some players and whatnot, but there's a lot of different teams that we just don't watch a whole lot of. And sometimes she's asking questions about the players, and sometimes the easiest way to point someone out is, Tess, it's that white guy. Or the black guy on that team, the big black guy. Not the little black guy, the big black guy. And so you don't realize how much your kids are hearing everything that you're saying. So I took Zion out yesterday for a little bit in the morning. Tess went to get a facial, and so we go to this burger place that we go to a lot, and they have TVs, and so we're watching the Knicks game, and so we're Knicks fans right now because the Lakers lost, and don't judge me. I lived in New York. I can claim it, okay? And so we're sitting there, we're watching the game, and I'm asking Zion, hey, you're cheering for the Knicks. You like the Knicks, right? And he's like, yeah, I like the Knicks. And then we're sitting there and we're eating, and out of nowhere, he looks and he goes, Dad, I don't like the Knicks. I was like, okay, that's okay. Because I like the black guys. Okay. And I'm like, no, there's 2 teams that are playing. The Knicks are wearing white and the Celtics are wearing green. And he's like, no. I like the black guys. I like the black guys. And I'm like, oh my Lord Jesus. And I'm like trying to get him to like, hey, we don't need to yell that. Like, I get you. These folks around us may not understand. And when you're trying to get a kid to be quiet, they only get louder. And so it just proceeds to be this black guys, I like black guys. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And sometimes your kids mirror things you wish they wouldn't, traits that you're not proud of. And suddenly you find yourself saying, guess what your child did today? Wondering where they picked that trait up from. And when I'm venting about something our son did, and Tess is listening and validating, deep down, she's probably thinking, well, he's just like you. And I don't want to see it all the time. And if I really wanted to get in trouble, I could give Tess a rebuttal, and actually it looks just like your dad too. But I don't want to sleep on the couch. But here's a pro tip for us all the parents in the room. No matter how much someone loves their parents, nobody wants to hear they've become them. But like it or not, if you're taking notes, you can write this down. The people who raise us imprint on us in unavoidable and undeniable ways. The people who raise us imprint on us in unavoidable and undeniable ways. Whether you like it or not, your parents shape your story. Some of that impact is beautiful. Some of it's baggage, but either way, it's inescapable. The patterns from your early years still steer you, whether you're repeating them or trying to outrun them. We're wired to love our caregivers, which is why it hurts so deeply when that love isn't returned. Right? When a parent relationship is missing or broken, we end up searching for it, sometimes without even realizing it. Like that little bird in the Dr. Seuss book, Are You My Mother? We go through life asking people, can you be what I lost? Can you be what I never had? And maybe your mom wasn't around, didn't understand you, or didn't seem to like you. Maybe she was wonderful and incredible, and now she's gone. Maybe you had a great relationship and feel both grateful and guilty because you know how rare that can be. Family shapes us. It always has and it always will. But in ancient cultures, especially among the Jewish people, family wasn't just important, it was everything. Look at what Exodus 20 verse 12 says. It says, honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Now, in ancient Jewish culture, honor meant putting that thing, speaking of your family, first, listening, obeying, following their lead. It wasn't just respect, it was devotion, right? That's what it meant to honor your family, to be fully committed and devoted to them. Bottom line, family was everything, which makes this thing that Jesus says so confusing. Look at what he says in Luke 14, verse 26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple, someone who follows me. It's even more confusing when you consider that Jesus also said this. Look at what Matthew 5, verse 44, it says this, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So you mean to tell me that Jesus is saying we're supposed to pray for the ones who hate us and hate the ones who love us? That's pretty confusing. So when Jesus invited people to follow him, he was saying, hey, I need to be number one. And he didn't just say this hate your mother and father stuff once. He said stuff like this on more than one occasion. Look at Matthew 10, 35 through 36. It says this, for I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. And when Jesus said, your enemies will be right in your own household, some of you thought, finally, Jesus gets me. I'm not crazy. While others of you are like, man, I thought I was gonna hear some nice, fluffy, encouraging Mother's Day message today. What an odd message to give on Mother's Day. But as shocking as that line is now for us, it was way more offensive back then. See, in Jesus' world, family wasn't just important, it was what defined you. But in today's culture, our jobs define us, our bank accounts define us, our hobbies or our Instagram bios define us. But in ancient collectivist cultures, your identity, your security, and support all came from your family. And it wasn't just mom, dad, and kids. The smallest unit was the father's household, multiple generations, married sons, their wives and kids, unmarried daughters, and even servants, all under the authority of one patriarch. He called the shots and you followed. And it may sound oppressive to us, but to them it wasn't impressive. In fact, it was very normal. It felt safe to them. Decisions weren't about me, they were always about us. And you didn't move forward in life without your family's blessings, and you never went against them. And so when Jesus invited people to follow him, and the Bible says things like this, it's a way bigger deal than most of us will probably ever understand. Look at what Matthew 4, verse 20, it says this, at once, speaking of the fishermen, it says they left their nets and followed Jesus. Jump to verse 22. And immediately they left the boat and their father and followed Jesus. And so people were walking away from their families to follow Jesus, not because they stopped loving their families, but because they were putting Jesus first. He became their new leader, their new source of guidance and authority. And that choice sent shockwaves in that culture. In their world, what it meant to the families was total rejection, being cut off from your community, losing your job, relationships, maybe spending life alone. And Jesus knew the cost of following him, and he did not sugarcoat it. He warned, think carefully about following me because it's going to cost you. And then he drops the word hate, which is not a small word to use. It's a big word. It's a heavy word. Why? Because that's what Jesus does. He says bold, shocking things to make us stop and think, and he doesn't mean literal hatred. He's using strong language to make a point about our priorities. Words carry weight, but they also carry context, right? There's a big difference between hating broccoli, hating a sports team, or the deep destructive hate that we've seen in history. I mean, I hate cottage cheese. Can't stand it. And I hate the University of Florida. And I hate the University of Alabama. And I hate the University of Tennessee. I could go on. The SEC is a big conference now. And I mean all of those statements, but it's not the same kind of hate, right? We probably all have family members that say they hate certain politicians and the people who follow them. And that's a way different kind of hate than hating a sports team or hating a type of food. And then you got the category that the kind of hate that you've seen in someone's eyes when someone hurts one of their kids. That's a whole different kind of hate. And then there's a kind of hate that unfortunately we saw in history that Hitler had for the Jews. And that maybe is the ultimate type of hate, to where you feel like you need to absolutely destroy anyone who fits a certain description. And so when Jesus says hate your family, he's not calling for cruelty. He's actually calling for clarity. When he says to hate your family, what he's saying is, who's first in your life? Look at what Matthew 10, verse 37, it says this: anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Jesus isn't telling you to be angry at your parents, to cut them off. He's not talking about feelings at all. For Jesus, love and hate are not emotions, they're actions. It's not about how you feel, it's about what you prioritize, because what you prioritize, you do, and what you do is ultimately how you live. And if you're taking notes, you can write this down. It's not that their families were bad. It's that pursuing God is the ultimate good. It's not that those people's families were bad. It's that pursuing God is the ultimate good. And when someone's priority shifts, it hurts, especially when you're no longer at the top of their list. Even if they're chasing something good, it still stings, right? Any parent who's watched their kid move away gets it, or if you have young kids, like I have a 3-year-old right now, you probably experience it in a little bit of a different way, right? My son, he picks who his favorite parent is based on who has the food in their hand. Right? He could ignore you and want nothing to do with you, and you go get something to eat, and you sitting there with it. He comes over, hi, Dad. Hi. You happy? Right? But we all understand what it feels like when someone's priorities shift and the impact is on us. Imagine Zebedee watching his sons leave the family fishing business to follow Jesus in a moment. Or Peter's wife hearing, I'm leaving everything to follow a rabbi. I can imagine the questions come fast. Like, do you hate me? What about our future? Are we still okay? And those are real, valid questions. And Jesus isn't saying that you just need to ignore those questions or ghost people. He's saying, though, when you follow God's call, some people will take it personally. They may feel hurt, confused, or angry. That doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It just means that the dynamic has changed, and change is hard. You don't hate them, but choosing Jesus over them might feel like hate to them. Still, that's exactly what Jesus asks us to do. Because if you're taking notes, here's our big idea today. Following Jesus requires us to prioritize our allegiance to him over the acceptance of others. Following Jesus requires us to prioritize our allegiance to him over the acceptance of others. I think we've all been there in middle school or high school wanting to be liked. wanting to be popular, wanting to fit in. And can I tell you, that feeling never really goes away. But what Jesus calls us to is to say, hey, are you willing to say and be fully devoted to me as a follower, even if it means that some people might look at you weird, that some people may not want to be associated with you, that some people may question your values or your beliefs? Will you still put me number one? Because following Jesus means redefining your identity. His family becomes your family, and loyalty to him becomes your top priority. That's how the early believers saw it. And so here's the real question: what defines you? What gets your best energy, your deepest loyalty, your ultimate yes? And be honest, whatever's in that top spot, people around you probably already know, because your actions always tell the truth. And here's a question for us to wrestle with. If we're taking notes, you write this down. Is it obvious to those around you that following Jesus is the number one priority for you? Is it obvious to the people around you that following Jesus is the number one priority for you? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone who calls themselves a Christian is actually following Jesus. In Jesus' day, there were critics, fans, casual followers, and devoted followers, because the deeper the commitment, guess what? The higher the cost. It's like marriage, right? Love requires priority. You can't claim someone matters most if everything else comes first. And I know some of you are like, well, this must be easy for you because of your job. Well, can I tell you, I would say it might be harder for me, because there are so many seasons and moments where my job is maybe more of a priority than my relationship with Jesus. And that's backwards, because my ability to do the job well is completely dependent on my relationship with Jesus. But can I tell you, there's some seasons where those priorities get out of order. And you guys want to know why Kevin was here last Sunday speaking for me? He was here because I called him on Wednesday of last week. And the reason I called him on Wednesday is because, we had planned a trip to go up north, but we were going to leave Sunday after services. And while we were up north, we said, okay, let's see if the San Francisco Giants are playing. We'll take Zion to a baseball game and while we're there. And so I looked at the calendar and I saw their schedule. And I was like, oh, it's perfect. It's happening the weekend, like after we're already there. So we'll just stop in SF on Friday and Saturday, go to a game, whatnot, and then come back. And fortunately, my wife, this is why women are so much better at logistics, she double checks the schedule and she calls me and she says, hey, you read it wrong. They're not there. They're actually playing in San Francisco this weekend. And so we won't be able to do it because you got to be there on Sunday. And there's a decision. Is this job more important than taking a little bit of extra time to do something with my family that would be an incredible memory for us as a family? You know how much my son loves baseball, yada, yada, yada. And so I called Kevin. I said, hey, Kevin, I need you to come teach for me. I know it's Wednesday, but can you do it? And he says, yeah, what's going on? I said, well, I don't need to be there. I would much rather be able to take my family to a Giants game in San Francisco. Not that I don't love you guys. But I just am trying to have these priorities right. And can I tell you that if you would have asked me that 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago, Tess would have said, oh, but you got to be there on Sunday. And I would have just said, yeah, that's right. I got to be there on Sunday. But man, I'm trying to figure these priorities right. And can I tell you what helps in getting those priorities right? Prioritizing your relationship with Jesus first. It just helps you to see everything in the necessary order to prioritize your life correctly. I think about Peter and John. They were arrested for stirring things up. They were teaching about Jesus. They were getting crowds riled up, and they got put on trial. And after all this back and forth, you talk about, is it obvious to those around you that following Jesus is the number one priority for you? This is what everyone observed after this trial. Look at what Acts 4:13, it says this: when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled ordinary men. They were astonished and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. It says based on how they spoke and how they acted, I could tell, man, they spent time with Jesus. In other words, you have clearly joined God's family when you act, speak, and look more like Jesus than your biological family. You're a spitting image of your heavenly Father. And if you're taking notes, write this down. This is how you know you have truly become a disciple of Jesus. Your words, actions, and decisions reflect Jesus. That is the goal. And can I just, on this Mother's Day, just celebrate some incredible women in my life. My mom, I would not be where I am today without her waking up at 4 a.m. every single day before work to go and pray. And I know that she was praying for me every single day, even when I could care less, even when I could really not give a crap about any of that stuff. She was on her knees crying out every single morning for me. And so I'm a result of her words and actions reflecting Jesus. I'm a result of my grandmother on my dad's side's words and actions reflecting Jesus. Can I tell you, I'm a result today of my mother-in-law and her words and actions reflecting Jesus. I'm a result today of my wife and her words and actions reflecting Jesus. I'm a result of so many of the incredible women in this community, their words and their actions reflecting Jesus. Because that's what it means to follow him. And so to recap a couple things. One, being a mom is tough. But don't forget that you're here because of her. And so call her today, tell her you love her, thank her even for just one thing that she did right. And two, saying yes to Jesus means putting him first in every part of your life. As much as you love your family, if they push you to go against Jesus, you still choose his way over their ways. And at times that may be painful, but here's what I've seen time and time again. If you're taking notes, the last thing I'll have you write down this morning is this: putting Jesus first makes your relationship with everything and everyone else better. It may feel out of order to begin with, but when you put him first, can I tell you, it'll make everything and everyone else better. When Jesus says, hate your family, he's not calling for cruelty, he's calling for clarity. Who comes first in your life? And I think about my mom. I can tell you that my mom's biggest thing is not that I would love her. My mom's biggest thing is that I would love Jesus. I can tell you that her prayer for me was that, man, I pray that my son would love Jesus way more than me. Because if he loved Jesus more than me, oh my gosh, everything else will get better. Who comes first in your life? Can I invite you to stand? Worship team is going to take a moment to sing over us. And as they do, just invite the Holy Spirit to honestly help you search your heart, to wrestle with that question, who comes first in your life? And then